What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Vector Podcast. My name is Christian Perez, and I'm your host. And today I'm very excited to have our guest with us, A'Yana Leonard. A'Yana Leonard is a veteran of the U.S. Army. And please, by all means, tell the audience who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, hi, I am A'Yana Leonard. You could say A'Yana, but I just go by A'Yana. I served in the United States Army, active duty, as a quartermaster in chemical equipment repair in various positions. And how I basically got into the tech industry was I started off tech support, tech sales, and then I got into all the coolness of schematics and everything like that, but also the sales and marketing portion. Worked all the way up as a director of marketing and digital strategy, which is where I was able to learn so many cool tech things such as coding, and cloud services, and so many other great things. For 10 years worth of experience doing all of that. I'm a mom to a beautiful little girl, and right now just doing a little bit of everything.
That is fantastic. So, that's actually one of the things that sort of sparked my interest in what you've got going on and what you're working on. For one, well, one of the things like I've mentioned to you in private before has been that one of the goals with the company and this podcast has really been to sort of shed light on veterans that are actively pursuing careers in tech. Not just for the sake of it being tech, but
Yeah.
primarily because of the fact that there is so much within that world that is
Yeah.
evolving, faster than we can even keep up sometimes.
Yeah.
And so it's always ideal to see someone who's really working hard within that realm, within that sphere. Um, and so it really struck me, because again, you mentioned that you've gotten into software, you've gotten into cloud, you've gotten into AI, ML, all these different, very complex yet still very relevant in today's day and age, very relevant fields of technology. And so, I was hoping maybe you could first start by elaborating, like, sort of when did all this start? I know you mentioned that you did some of it while you were in the army, but what sort of drove you to take that next step?
I think with starting with sales and marketing, I think you have customers that have real world issues. I think I knew that I had this innovative spirit when I looked outside the box to solve a lot of these issues that these customers were dealing with, even when it came to just modems and everything like that. Then when it transferred to even the army, it's always the what if this could be better. Then when working through marketing and working my way up the ladder with marketing, it was the same thing. There was always something new. There was always a easier way to do it, a more innovative way to do it. And that was my whole thing with being a marketer is what would set us aside, whatever company it was for, what would set us aside from the regular company that has a regular marketer. And that's when I fell into all the cloud and all of this stuff, things that we can learn right now in the office and we can implement within the first week. And most importantly, when it comes to like marketing and everything like that, they want to save money and they want it to be fast. And so that's how I was able to just do a complete deep dive, which is like I always tell people, like, it was never a straight line with me. Traditional, go to college straight out of high school and then go get the degree and then start as engineer. No, it was just something I just wanted to be really competitive. And at that time, this was, 2019 going into 2020, a lot of people weren't talking about quantum. They weren't talking about AI. They weren't talking about cloud systems. They weren't talking about any of that when it came to the marketing and the programming and all of that stuff. So I felt that's what made us competitive. And so that's how I was able to get here.
That's wonderful. So, let's dive deeper into marketing and AI. I think there in and of itself, that's been a very sort of like a field that's been heavily disrupted, not necessarily in a bad way. I would argue, in many ways, a good way.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how much AI has influenced the field of marketing and where you see it happening, like, on the daily or however it is that your workflow is? How do you see that? How do you see AI affecting the field of marketing?
Well, I would start off with basically the understanding of artificial intelligence. I think people view AI as something that can do everything instead of a tool. This could be something you work with, something that works with you. And so when it comes to marketing and just selling it, I think that's the way that you would sell it. That's the way that I would sell it. Is this is not one size fits all. This is something that we can build ourselves. This is something that we can construct ourselves to better the company. And so that's how I would see AI going into marketing is if this is a clinic, urgent care, and they don't do traditional health insurance, but they do more so subscriptions. And that's how they want to separate themselves. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, they can go on their website. You can get somebody to build that model, train that model, or you can take the model from Kaggle and then get somebody to further extend on that model to customize it to be something that you could use. Because this is something that a lot of companies don't have. A lot of urgent cares or a lot of clinics don't have. And so when they go to your website, whatever questions they have or whatever, they can get them answered clearly, precisely with the right training. And so whether it's urgent care, whether it's a boutique, whatever it is, not only can it be customized to the customer's needs, but also it can make things a lot faster for that company as well.
So what do you think then? Because you did mention that that a lot of companies don't actually have this technology, but
Yeah.
the reality is everybody has access to it, right?
Mhm.
So it sounds to me like like you mentioned, people are just not using it, right? So
Right.
where are people getting AI wrong? Like, what are they not doing correctly? That if they were to change that behavior, if they were to change that process, whatever it may be, they would see improved ROI.
Oh, yeah, this is something that people have been working on and researching on for a very long time, and they've been dropping little bits here and there. First thing that people get wrong about AI is that it's something new. They don't know that AI is multifaceted. It doesn't have to be just a chat bot. The number one thing that people get wrong is that it's something new. It's one size fits all. We can just take from the other company. No, you can make it what you want to make it. Company as complicated as people think. This is something you can do on your computer, on your phone, right now.
You're right. So AI has been around, like I mentioned, since the 50s.
Mhm.
It's really now that we have, our phones, that we have the cloud, and we have
Yeah.
all these different other sort of peripheral tools that we're
Mhm.
now able to leverage it the way that we are, right? So what do you think is holding people back from diving in? Do you think it's like it feels too like tech intensive?
I think it's that people think it is too techy to understand. And I feel like that's when my sales side comes in because when you're dealing with people that just are like, well, I don't know if this is something that I could do. I don't know if this is something that I can implement, or I don't have the money for it. Because that is another thing. People feel like it is just so expensive. And so I feel like I think it's just, people just think it's too techy. And then also the controversy of it's hurting the environment. And that is also a big thing, a big misunderstanding is that it's not AI. That's hurting. It's not AI. This is, like I said, this is something that you could just keep in your office, something you could just keep on your computer, something you can keep for yourself. And so really educating people, but also getting rid of that fear that this is something that you can't do. This is something that you have to get 3 PhDs in order to understand.
So what would you recommend to somebody if they wanted to get into it, right? I agree with you 100%. I think the majority of people see AI as like just a really fancy chatbot,
Mhm.
and I agree. It's a lot more than that, right? So you get somebody, veteran who just got out of the military, or maybe a high schooler who's about to go into college. A lot of high schoolers nowadays are kind of getting into it. But like, how would you encourage someone like, hey, why don't you try this out?
I would try to see first where they're coming from, if they're even open to it.
Mhm.
But that's my number one pitch for people that are like scared of it is the that this is something you use every day anyway. Whether it's your phone being able to recognize what code you just put it into it and it recognize facial recognition, all of that. These are all things that, are newer. These are all things that are newer. These are just little tidbits of things that are new. So it's nothing to be afraid of. But I think it would start off with educating them on whatever it is that they need. So trying to think of a random scenario of what somebody would need it for. Say, you're looking for a home. You're looking for a home and you have Zillow, you have realtor.com, you have so many things, but it seems like it's just not hitting the spot. You put in a filter and it still may not be what you're looking for. You can build your own or train a model that already exists if you may not have the patience, but you can build your own platform where you can figure out or train it in a way to find what you need. You're not just looking for a home, you're looking for a home under $500,000. Not only are you looking for a home under $500,000, but you're also looking for a home where, they may work with you. Whoever the seller is, they may be able to work with you. They may take this certain type of credit. They may take this. What companies work with people with this type of credit? You can customize it in any way and filter it any way that already may be non existent on that site. And so it's something that is there for you and whatever you need. And so it's something that's for you, but you don't have to go so big. And I think that's what's really stopping people is they're thinking almost all the time. The first thought is the big data centers. That's like their first thought, which is no, you can start at your computer right now.
Right. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. Now, let's backtrack a little bit and talk a little bit about you.
Yeah.
So, what was your first sort of AI or tech project? What did that look like? What inspired you to do it? And, how did that go overall?
Ooh, so my first AI project was I had discovered that my daughter had symptoms or signs of autism. And once she was evaluated, it was so scary. I was so nervous because I didn't know a lot about autism. I didn't know the steps and everything that I was researching was so generalized. And that spectrum is so broad when it comes to autism. Every child is different. And so what I did was I built my own autism chat GPT, which was called Mom Hive. And it was just something personal. I do it on my phone. And what I basically did was I just took whatever, went on some website, they can help me structure it and get all the information I was able to get, whether it was the APIs, if I needed to use a postman to validate the APIs, whatever it was, and through that, I was able to learn so many things, such as API validation and everything like that. But just building this platform so that I could have some comfort, and it's built to assist me as a mom with a child who has autism and may not know how to deal with certain things. They're to calm me down so that it's not the end of the world, and to educate on what is good and what is something that could be a concern, what is normal. Because as parents, I don't know anything. As a single mom, I don't know everything about autism. And so that was really scary for me. And so I just thought, let me just invent my own platform that can just be customized to myself and my daughter, most importantly.
Oh, that's truly fantastic. I mean, it really is. I'm a father of a 2-year-old baby boy, so like,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
I can understand,
Hmm.
how much, as a parent, it means to want to do the very best, for your kids.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic story. So, so you have your first project. You said it's called Mom Hive. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Gotcha. I love that name. Did you ever market it? Did you ever put it out like into the public, or is this something that you said it's kind of yours, your personal sort of kind of website platform, if you will?
So this is something that anybody could go on.
Okay,
I did create a
nice.
LinkedIn page for it, if people are interested, but it was started off as something personal, but if they find it on LinkedIn and they want to, go to the website, they can.
Nice,
So and
fantastic.
use it.
So, all right. So then now your career begins to evolve, right? So
Yeah.
you've gotten your first project under your belt. Then what happens? Are you in school again? Are you back in school?
I have one bachelor's and I have two masters working on another bachelor's, which is more focused in engineering, software engineering. And I changed from computer science to software engineering. I'm always going to be in school forever.
I love it. I love it. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about the software developer, software engineering side of things. Do you primarily work in the cloud, or or do you prefer to work local, like sort of like on premises, if you will?
Definitely the cloud.
Okay. Do you have a preferred cloud service provider?
Oh, definitely EKS because that was like my first in AWS EKS. That was
Gotcha.
kind of like my first outside of Azure. That's the one a lot of people use as well. But that one was kind of like my first experience with cloud services because you have like the Docker, and then I thought Docker was as high as you can go. And then I
Yeah.
learned that that wasn't the case. I learned that wasn't the case throughout my LLC. There were some companies out in Austin, Texas, that were like, "Do you know anything about Kubernetes?" And I'm like, "No." So I had to learn, because now things are growing and everything like that. So I had to learn all of that stuff. So that was like my first taste of cloud services, besides just the basics of you know back in marketing. But that was like my first taste with like software development and all that other cool stuff.
And so, what's your general approach, or your opinion rather, on how AI is impacting the field of software developers? I know one of the things that like a lot of kind of, I don't want to call them old school, but like a lot of folks who did a lot of the coding on them by themselves or on their own.
Yeah.
It's a very highly contested and a very tenuous issue that people are having with regards to folks who use AI to code
Mm.
versus people who learn how to code and code it themselves.
Yeah.
What's your overall opinion on that?
I think AI is not, I wouldn't trust it to do everything. I think it's more of a partner though, because there are things that you do miss. I don't believe in completely, I believe that vibe coding is going to hit a dead end unless it's a small project, say it's something as simple as like Mom Hive. If it's something like that, you could vibe code that. But I feel like once you get to a certain level, you're going to need debugging and all this other stuff. So I do believe that AI is more of a partner. I do believe that AI could definitely take away junior level software developer positions just because that's more specifically front end, or maybe they're just good with back end. So they may know is React. All they
Hmm.
may know is Node.js. I definitely see AI completely, not completely, but diminishing the need for those. But at the same time, I'm a firm believer in getting ahead of the game. And what I mean by that is right now, people are more so building these language models to understand Python or C++, to do stuff like that. But when it comes to things like Rust or languages like Rust or anything higher than that, especially the quantum languages, it definitely may hit some glitches. So I feel like as long as you stay ahead of the game as a developer, always learning, always being at a state of learning and being willing to learn, then you don't ever have to worry about being in competition with AI because the people that are building and training those models are people that are staying ahead of the ball game. So as long as
Yes.
you stay afloat with them and stay in the race with them, AI would not be a problem. But I think if you are in a place of being stagnant as a developer, yeah, I do think that it may be a little tricky. Developers that are just like, no, I'm not going to use the AI stuff. I'm not going to do it. Yeah, I think that's where it gets tricky. But if you are always growing, innovating, and willing to learn something new, even creating your own language, you'll be fine.
So how then? Because I think as you move forward, right? There's also a huge push for like AI agents, right?
Yeah.
But, like you mentioned, I do agree that, AI, the current LLMs, the current, models that we're using, at least, broadly or at large,
Yeah.
are primarily trained on, far more common or newer-ish languages like Python.
Yeah.
At least that seems to be the language of choice for the
Yeah.
majority of LLMs when, we generate software or anything like
Mhm.
that. With AI agents being sort of like, the thing that's largely talked about right now. First of all, what's your take on agents? And second, how do you see these more modern languages being introduced when, LLMs are really trained on a massive amount of information that's currently out there, right? So if we're not directly training them on a huge breadth of like Rust and all these different languages that you mentioned, well, they're not going to improve very much, right?
Right.
But if we train them more on that, then ideally we would see improvement. So first of all, so let's, going back, what is your take on AI agents and
Yeah.
how do you see AI agents moving forward as we begin to introduce things like quantum?
Oh, yeah. So I can definitely see. Well, I have no problem with AI agents. I think I have a problem with people that companies like smaller companies that want AI agents, but they don't know what they do. So quick to maybe replace. Sorry, the background noise. But so quick to replace physical people, human beings, with an agent without really knowing everything about that agent or how that AI agent was trained. So that is the only thing I'm against. But I'm all for AI agents, just as long as whatever platform you're using or whatever, it's good for whatever you need. And then just have a backup person. But when it comes to training the AI agents to be able to eventually understand quantum, I always resort back to somebody's building that. Somebody is building that because, like I said, it's not just I as in intelligence. It's artificial intelligence. Somebody is behind that, and I think that it would have to take researchers, quantum computing researchers, to be able to train. And so my go-to is always keeping with the up and up and just being willing to learn more about it so that those agents will be able to be trained. But right now, I don't see many agents being trained.
Gotcha.
Not yet. We still have
Yeah.
HPCs and stuff like that where people are trying to train them to do that. I seen somebody with a platform trying to train an agent to do chip design, which is not there yet. But with more training, I believe that AI will certainly be able to um, take these roles. These agents will be able to take on these roles, but not yet. I think it will still be at a pretty, I wouldn't say basic, but common level where everybody can understand it.
That's one of the things that I try to, often tell people and, clients who approach me, wanting an AI agent. It's like the more agents you introduce, the more potential points of failure you're introducing, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like the idea is, like you mentioned, to keep it very simple, very straightforward,
Mhm.
with observability and clearly being able to track exactly what's going on, what's
Yeah.
happening, what APIs are being called, what resources, what tools are being used, so on and so forth. Yeah. As soon as, the more convoluted you make that web, I mean,
Yeah.
you're literally just adding all sorts of levels of potential failures.
Yeah.
And, before you know it, that can result in like, pretty catastrophic things that, it takes
Yeah.
a lot of cleanup and it could get real expensive real quick.
Yeah.
But so, on the topic of like, AI agents and just, general use of AI,
Mhm.
what are your go-to AI tools? Like on a daily basis, what do you use?
So my regular everyday use of AI consists of, if it's small, I typically get inspiration from platforms like Vercel. Vercel
Yeah.
is more so front end, and I know a lot of people hate that. They hate that vibe coding part, but I'm a firm believer. If I don't have to waste time trying to just sit down and figure out front end, I'm not. So I typically get my inspiration from Vercel, and that's really where I stay at for the most part. I think that's where I stay at. Besides trying to figure out what other AI tools outside of ChatGPT.
No, that's fine. I mean, if ChatGPT is one, I mean, that's great to know, right? Because it's like, like that's one of the things that like, actually, it's kind of funny that you say that. Other than ChatGPT, I use Vercel, but ChatGPT is like one of the most widely used across the planet, right?
Yeah.
Still, despite that, a lot of people are still convinced that ChatGPT is just like a fancy chatbot, right? So,
Yeah.
goes back to our original sort of topic where we're talking about how like AI is infinitely more complex and you could do so much
Yeah.
more than just like simply chat, with it. You could really build things out. You could really do stuff. I know, ChatGPT has, at least Pro. I
Yeah.
know ChatGPT has Pulse that, kind of gives you a daily sort of updates as to, hey, I noticed that you were working on XYZ yesterday. You should check this out, whatever, maybe kind of gives you that like, that immediate sort of boost at the start of your day.
Mhm.
They've also just introduced the image generation, which I don't think it compares too well with Nano Banana Pro, but it's still not a bad option. Like it's
Yeah.
pretty good for if you're trying to get some creative work done. They have Codex, which is another fantastic coding tool, and all
Mhm.
of this is directly a part of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Still, so many people think it's just a chatbot. You know,
Right.
so yeah, so you use ChatGPT,
Yeah.
you use Vercel. Is there a difference between what you use sort of personally and what you use at work?
No.
No, okay,
Okay, so I'm more right now in a position of like more of a contractor role,
yeah, gotcha.
99 contractor role. I would say definitely when I'm doing like the cool chip designs and stuff like that, easy EDA, they're trying to implement AI into easy EDA for PCB design and stuff like that. But like I said, there was one platform that I saw like an ad for it. I'm scared to say, so I won't say. They tried their best to get AI to be able to design PCB boards. Um, they're so complex. They everything is just so tiny detail that it just didn't hit. And I went to the comments and saw so many other chip designers and so many other engineers that were like, it's so close, but it just needs more detail. So that's really what I'm all around working on right now is really chip design and the PCBs, all that cool stuff. But that's what I'm really
Gotcha.
working on now. Working on big project now that is involving that. So that's all I'm using right now is just Chat GPT. And then if it needs to be a presentation, I would use Vercel, of course.
Awesome. Awesome. So it sounds like, you're obviously very well involved with
Mm,
with a lot of what's going on in the cloud, a lot of what's going on with AI, a lot of what's going on even on the hardware side.
mm,
So, it's right now it's December 29th, a couple more
yeah,
days and we'll be into 2026.
yeah.
So what is your take on 2026? Or, what types of conversations do you think we'll be having a year from now?
More quantum,
Okay.
the potential of quantum. I feel like it's not being talked about as much. I feel like right now people are more so focused on like, super intelligence,
Can
which,
you can you tell our audience actually a little bit about what quantum is and why it's so impactful? I know that there was some announcements in the recent NVIDIA
yeah,
keynote, which was
yeah,
huge. But again, it's the kind of thing that it's like unless you're really, really involved in tech, like that'll go over your head.
yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a massive improvement in the capabilities once quantum goes, fully public.
Yeah.
So would you mind just kind of going over, for our audience, like, hey, this is generally what quantum is and this is why it's so impactful.
The best way that I could describe quantum is that bigger than just regular CPU, bigger than just regular GPU, everything combined used for bigger things. So I don't see quantum computing being used for like regular chat GPT, maybe that's just my opinion. But quantum computing to me is being able to figure out these broad, I think of like a mathematical super genius when it comes to data processing, when it comes to everything. A real world example would be finding different ways to diagnose autism. And maybe right now the spectrum is so broad, but with quantum computing, you can shorten it because it may be other things, but we would not know. It's the same with, I know this is why it's so controversial for people to talk about quantum, but it's the same with cancer diagnosis and everything. It's definitely shortening the time, but it is so much more quick and also a far more intelligent than we could ever, ever, ever imagine. And so that's what I always say about quantum computing so that everybody can understand is just think way bigger than what you could think of right now. But I don't think it would be used every day for everyday regular chat. No, I think it would definitely be something that is in labs for sure.
Do you think it's the missing link between AI and what's commonly referred to as AGI, or is AGI even achievable?
I think AGI could be achievable, but I think that no matter what, there will always be somebody behind it. No
Yeah,
matter what, there will always be somebody behind it because it's not a real human being. And I think that would really be my real question when it comes to AGI is how would you get this thing to be able to think so independently? And also, will it have off button? You know, or is it just sitting there and just always thinking? Some of us as human beings, we could just sit there 24 hours work on a project. We can sit there 24 hours but eventually we need sleep, no matter how much you're up. So would it have an off button? How would that work? And so I don't want to say that I think that quantum is more achievable, and I know this maybe just totally crazy, but I think it may be a little bit more practical than just I think it has more of a purpose. That's how I'm gonna say. I think it has more of a purpose than just all around everyday use of AGI. Why would the average American need that's just how I think of it. And I think that may just be the sales marketing side of me is
sure.
I think an average human being, not just American, but just average human being would just wonder why would I need that? But I think that any human being, when it comes to quantum computing, I think any human being would agree that it shouldn't take this long to figure out cancer and shouldn't take this long to shorten the spectrum of autism. And so I think that quantum is just more practical. That's
So
just
on
my
that,
opinion.
no, 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 I appreciate it, and like I said, it's always great to have your opinion. So, you know, so on that same vein, right? We're talking about it shouldn't take this long for cancer and autism to be in some ways, perhaps not entirely curable. Cancer, I think ideally would be a curable disease.
Yeah.
Autism, I understand, exists, within a spectrum. So
Mhm.
perhaps we can identify certain areas, like you mentioned, where it's no longer classified as such, just because we've made advances that are significant enough to say, hey, this is actually this other thing that you can address, not necessarily autism, right? But so we're talking about how diseases and different, maladies can be addressed. Is that something that you foresee as well in 2026? Like, do you think we'll start seeing cures and therapeutics and medication at a much larger scale, or perhaps more impactful than it has been in the past? I'm curious as to what other advances you think or you foresee happening in this next coming year.
Absolutely. I think that we would progress. I also think that the tech industry is going to shift in a position of less developers, just opinion, less developers, more researchers. And I think that is why we may see a lot more of medical miracles, but I think that's why we may see a lot more of that when it comes to a lot of things, not just with medicine, but even with mental illness. People will be able to really get down to the root cause of it or be able to shorten whatever spectrum it is. So whether it's a depression, whether it's an anxiety, whether it's ADHD or whatever, it's more precise. But that is also one of my predictions is that the tech industry will take on a lot more researchers
Hmm.
than everyday developers.
I could not agree more. I think you're absolutely right. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about something that we haven't really discussed yet. I want to talk about your army experience.
Yeah.
Your time in the military. So, like, how long were you in? When did
Oh,
you go to basic? When did
yeah.
you get out? What did you like about it? All that.
Yeah. So I only did one contract. I only
Mhm.
did one contract. I joined 2017, quartermaster and chemical equipment repairer. I really wanted to be a mechanical engineer. And so I felt like that would get me in the door with maintenance and stuff like that. And then once I kind of seen all those schematics and stuff like that in AIT, I realized that I may have to branch off into something else. But the Army, for me, I went to basic 2017, AIT early 2018. And so we were like the first class where they were trying to see like a hybrid, half drill sergeant, half regular platoon sergeant. This is when they were trying to see what works best because
Mm.
traditionally it was just drill sergeants. And then they switched it to no drill sergeants. And so they were doing some swap going on at Fort Lee where they wanted to see a mixture to see how that is. So I don't know how it is today or how that even panned out. And then I got stationed at Fort Hood. I was really excited to go to Fort Hood. Um, the Stetson, being a part of First Cav, that was everything to me. And I think I was originally a part of a unit that poured into me wanting to be better than what I was. I think a lot of the time you get trapped in just the motor pool of it all. I'm just being out in the motor pool all day, every day. But I'm blessed to say that one of my first units really poured into me. So I was able to continue my school online and still be able to do my active duty service duties, field. I was in tank battalion. So live fire during the nighttime out there. So I was still able to balance all of that. That was the only contingency was that am able to balance all of it. And then went on my first deployment, controversial Poland. Sometimes they don't call it deployment. They say, no, just that's just a rotation. So first deployment, Poland. And then after that, went through something really bad at Fort Hood that caused me to be hospitalized and then had to do a whole bunch of inpatient and outpatient care. And so, which ultimately led to the end of my Army career, sadly. However, good note though, left as a good soldier, honorable discharge, just unfortunate ending, but common with a lot of female soldiers on Fort Hood. And so my career, unfortunately, was over because of that. There was no way to recover and be able to put back on the uniform after that. So from there, I just did what I knew what to do. I left the Army November 18th or I'm sorry, November 3rd, 2020. And then sadly found out my mom passed November 18th, 2020. And then 3 weeks after that, I found out that I was pregnant with my daughter and that going forward I was gonna be single mom. So and still doing school. So it was a lot, but by the grace of God, able to get it all done for the most part.
I mean, I think that speaks volumes though,
Yeah.
because I can't even begin to imagine,
Mhm.
how challenging that must be. But it does speak volumes towards your resilience and your tenacity.
Mhm.
Because that's enough to break a lot of people down to the point that they're just like, they relegate themselves to that's it. Like I can't
Mhm.
do this anymore. Like there's no way that I'm going to continue to progress. There's no way that I'm going to continue to pursue more. There's no way like that. A lot of the experiences that you described are, unfortunately affect a lot of people in that manner that I described, in that they just feel like they just can't. So
Right.
what would you say was what drove you to keep going, to keep pushing forward?
Besides God and my daughter, that there's always more out there. This planet is so big, you know. It's so big, and there's always more. There's so many things out there that have not been touched or discovered, and I would hate to be the person that went to bed knowing this and woke up and seeing somebody else have that same idea, but they actually went for it. That's what keeps me going outside of God and my daughter, is that there's something inside of all of us, but something inside of myself that knows that there's something bigger out there that has not been touched, that has not been spoken about, that has not been heard, that somebody is going to figure it out. And I feel like we're all capable as human beings of discovering that something or some things. And I feel like tricky thing about life is that sometimes we will go through traumatic things as adults. It's never just one traumatic thing. It's always a whole heap of things that will try to stop us from tapping into that. And I think that's what keeps me motivated, is that though I went through a lot behind me, that there is an entire universe ahead of me. And I'm just gonna take it on every single day. Even if I don't know everything, I'm gonna get to know everything. I didn't take, most engineers, they freak out because they didn't pass physics in high school. I didn't take physics until I was in college. Same for calculus, all of it. I didn't touch any of that until I was grown adult. But I was determined to figure it out. And amongst many other things, I tell myself, or I call myself the engineer with extreme ADHD, because once I touch one thing, I'm like, oh my goodness, but what if? What if if I can't do a GPU at home or a QPU at home, but what if I can put it on an FPGA? What if I can, give it to smaller companies? It's like always that what if. And that's what always keeps me going. God, my daughter, and the what if.
It's fascinating because what you're describing is this sort of like spirit of exploration, like
Mhm.
like what's beyond, what's on the other side. If I keep going,
Mhm.
what's past that?
Right.
Can I discover something that's never been seen?
Yeah.
It's always interesting to hear, right? Because in some ways, and I share the same sentiment. Let me preface it with saying, like, one of my biggest fears, and it's inevitable, right? But like one of the things that I don't even like to think about it, right, is like, understanding, of course, that we're all finite, right? At some point,
Right.
we're all going to have our last day on this planet.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I don't like to think about is the fact that, like, I'll never know everything,
Right.
right? It's impossible, right? Because there's so much out there. It's impossible to ever know everything.
Mhm.
But that same sense of like, okay, I'm never gonna know everything. At the very least, it makes it so that every single day I can, learn one new thing, right?
Right.
But it takes the, that same spirit that you're describing, right? That spirit of like, innovation, exploration, wanting to see more, wanting to learn more. There has to be a high degree of ambition, right? So do you feel like that was innate to you? Like ever since you were like a little kid, did you always have that sort of like spirit of ambition?
Yeah, since childhood, but I think the army really put that in me, because I don't joining the army. If you would have told me when I was 14 years old that I would have joined the army, I would have probably laughed at you. I'm like, what? But it's something about the army. The army really pushes you to a point where you don't think that your flesh can actually do that. Like you
No.
just don't. That's just not. There are still days where I literally lay in bed and I'm like, I cannot believe a drill sergeant screamed in my face. Like, I cannot believe that I wore that uniform every single day. And if you can get through that and you thought it was absolutely impossible, just imagine what else you could do. You already feel the moment you arrive, you're doing your first PT test. Like, how in the world am I going to be able to do 52 sit ups? Unless that felt like forever to me. I only did like 12. Like, I just thought, like, there's no way I can do this. Like, there's no way. But to just get pushed to such a point where my ambition, my hustle, and my drive really outdid my flesh. It really outdid my brain. And yeah, that definitely comes from the military. That
Mm.
definitely comes from the military. That is crazy to me. But that's
Yeah.
where that comes from.
If you had to give a veteran, one word of encouragement, one sort of like, hey, like this is, there's more out. One thing that you wish perhaps somebody would have told you, as you were getting ready to get out of the army, regardless of the circumstances or anything like that.
Mhm.
What do you wish, someone perhaps would have told you when you were getting out?
You already did the hard part. That's what I would tell most veterans. A lot of veterans feel like when they come out of the military, they're starting from zero. No, you already did the hard part. You did what most could not and would not do. And that alone speaks volumes, not just to employers, not just to your peers, people around you, but that should be something that every day you look in the mirror and realize you already did the hard part. And now it's just staying on that, staying on that. Don't lose momentum. Even when you feel like it, just stay on that, is you already did the hard part. That was the hardest thing you could have ever done. Now it's just up from here. It's just up.
I love it. A'Yana, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Please let our audience know, like, where can they find you? Is there anything that you're currently working on that you want people to go check out?
If you want to find me, I'm mostly on LinkedIn. So A'Yana Leonard is how you can find me. And then some things that I'm working on, just one, is I'm working on figuring out a way that smaller tech companies can experience chips. And I'm using FPGA to allow smaller companies to be able to experience and maybe just get a little bit of a taste. So not making GPUs in my house, but just get a little bit of a taste to kind of see what it's like and just kind of learn what it's like to use something like that. So that's basically what I'm working on right now is using FPGAs for things they haven't been used for quite yet.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to make sure I post basically everything you're working on, your LinkedIn and everything will be in the video description. And for our audience, thank you all so much. Please don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel. And again, this has been another episode of the Vector Podcast. A'Yana Leonard, again, thank you so much for coming on, and we will catch you on the next one.